Think about how you give directions of your house to a friend. You usually say something like, take a left at the park and it's the third building on the right. But what if you are stuck in the middle of the massive Pacific Ocean or flying a plane through an empty sky? How do you point to an exact spot on a giant spinning planet? To solve this, humans had to wrap the entire world in a giant invisible grid. But before we look at that grid, we need to clear up a massive myth. The Earth is not a perfect round basketball. Because our planet is constantly spinning at a mind blowing speed, the rotation actually forces the middle to stretch out. The Earth is a bit chubby at the equator and slightly squished or flattened at the north and south poles. In fact, if you measured the Earth from side to side at the equator, it is 22 kilometers wider than if you measured it from top to bottom. Because of this irregular shape, identifying a location is a nightmare without a reference system. That is why we invented latitudes and longitudes. Let's start with latitudes. Imagine taking a bunch of horizontal hula hoops and stacking them around the Earth. The absolute biggest hula hoop sits right around the dead center of the planet. This is the equator, and we slice it at 0 degrees. The equator acts like a giant knife, cutting the world into two equal halves, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. As you go north or south from the equator, the hula hoops get progressively smaller and smaller until they shrink into tiny points at the 90-degree North Pole and the 90-degree South Pole. Every single degree of latitude is separated by about 110 kilometers of land. If a line is north of the equator, we mark it with an N, and if it's south, we give it an S. Within these lines, there are four major celebrity latitudes you absolutely must know. The Tropic of Cancer at 23.5 degrees north, the Tropic of Capricorn at 23.5 degrees south, the Arctic Circle at 66.5 degrees north, and the Antarctic Circle at 66.5 degrees south. These four lines are incredibly important because they act as the boundaries for the Earth's heat zones. The area trapped right in the middle between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn is the torrid zone. Because it faces the sun dead on, the midday sun shines exactly overhead at least once a year, making this zone an absolute furnace that receives the maximum amount of heat. Move past the tropics toward the poles and you enter the temperate zones. Here, the sun's rays hit the curved surface at an angle, spreading the heat out. The sun never shines directly overhead here, giving these regions mild, moderate temperatures. Finally, pass the Arctic or Antarctic circles and you hit the frigid zones. In these regions, the sun barely even rises above the horizon, keeping the land locked in a permanent freezing dark winter. Now, those horizontal hoops help us map the world from north to south. But we still need to map it from east to west. This is where longitudes step onto the stage. Instead of horizontal hula hoops, imagine slicing an orange into vertical wedges from top to bottom. These vertical lines are called meridians. Unlike latitudes, which get smaller near the poles, every single meridian is a semicircle of the exact same length, stretching from the North Pole to the South Pole. The distance between them is widest at the equator and shrinks down to zero at the poles where all the lines tightly meet. To start counting, we needed a 0-degree baseline. In 1884, the world agreed that the starting vertical line would pass right through the British Royal Observatory in Greenwich, London. We call this the prime meridian. From this line, we count 180 degrees eastward and 180 degrees westward, splitting the Earth into the eastern and western hemispheres. Interestingly, the 180-degree east line and 180-degree west line are the exact same line on the back of the globe. But these vertical lines don't just tell us where we are, they literally control the watch on your wrist. Because the Earth rotates from west to east, different parts of the planet hit the sunlight at different times. When the sun is at its absolute highest point over the prime meridian in London, it is exactly midday or noon for everyone on that line. Since the Earth takes 24 hours to complete a full 360-degree rotation, we can do some simple math. 360 degrees divided by 24 hours means the Earth rotates exactly 15 degrees every single hour. Break that down further, and it moves 1 degree every 4 minutes. Because of this, places to the east of London see the sun first, so their time is ahead. Places to the west see it later, so their time is behind. If you move 15 degrees east of London, you're exactly 1 hour ahead of London time. If you move 15 degrees west, you are 1 hour behind. This creates a massive problem. If every single city used its own local meridian to set its clocks, train schedules and business would be in complete chaos. Every town would have a different time. To fix this, countries established a standard time. In India, we chose the meridian of 82.5 degrees east to be our anchor line. The local time on this exact line is what we call Indian Standard Time, IST, and it applies to the entire country. Because India sits well to the east of London, our clocks are exactly 5 hours and 30 minutes ahead of Greenwich Mean Time. So when it is 2 p.m. in London and people there are just finishing their lunch, it is already 7:30 p.m. in India and we are getting ready for dinner. And that is the incredible system of latitudes and longitudes. They aren't just boring numbers and lines in a geography textbook. They are a brilliant worldwide network. A system that lets a pilot find a tiny island in a vast ocean, divides our planet into tropical and frozen zones, and synchronizes the clocks of billions of people so the modern world can run on time. Imagine you are an astronaut floating in deep space, looking back at Earth. You don't see a planet made of dirt and rock. You see a glowing, breathtaking blue sphere. Why? Because nearly 3/4 of our entire planet is completely covered in water. That is why we call it the blue planet. In fact, the Indian Navy has a powerful motto, Sam no Varuna, which means be auspicious to us, O Varuna, calling upon the ancient deity of the oceans. They know that the sea is literally the lifeblood of our world. But here is a crazy fact about our planet. The land and water are not shared equally. If you look at the northern hemisphere, it is packed with land. This is where you find the massive continent of Asia, the biggest piece of land on Earth. But if you flip the globe and look at the southern hemisphere, it is almost entirely water. Speaking of land, how many continents are there? You probably learned in school that there are 7. But depending on who you ask, some scientists will say 6 or 5 or even 4. For example, Europe and Asia are actually just one giant connected piece of rock that geologists call Eurasia. Did you know the 5 rings of the Olympic logo actually stand for the 5 major inhabited continents coming together? And what about pieces of land surrounded entirely by water? We call them islands. The biggest one on Earth is Greenland. But India alone has over 1,300 islands, including the Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep. India even went all the way down to the freezing, isolated continent of Antarctica in 1983 to set up a scientific base called Dakshin Gangotri. They even built a post office in the ice. Now let's talk about the water. On a map, we give the oceans 5 different names: the massive Pacific, the Atlantic, our very own Indian Ocean, the freezing Southern Ocean, and the tiny Arctic. But here is the big secret. There are no walls in the sea. It is actually just one giant, continuous, interconnected body of salt water flowing freely around the entire globe. But why is it so salty? Because for millions of years, rain and rivers have been washing minerals and salts off the land and dumping them straight into the sea. All the fresh water we actually need to drink, from lakes, rivers, and groundwater, makes up only a tiny, tiny fraction of the world's total water. This massive body of salt water completely controls our lives. When ocean water evaporates, it creates the giant cloud systems that bring India our vital monsoon rains. Without the Indian Ocean, our farms would dry up and die. But the ocean is also terrifying. It breeds brutal tropical cyclones and, worst of all, tsunamis. In December 2004, a massive underwater earthquake near Indonesia triggered a tsunami so powerful it rushed across the Indian Ocean and devastated coastlines, including parts of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Over 200,000 people lost their lives. That tragedy is exactly why today India has a National Disaster Management Authority and heavy early warning systems to detect these invisible monsters in the water before they strike. Finally, we have to respect the ocean because it literally keeps us breathing. Everyone tells you that trees give us oxygen. But did you know that tiny marine plants in the ocean, called phytoplankton, produce a massive proportion of all the oxygen in the world? The oceans are the true lungs of our planet. But right now, we are choking those lungs. We are dumping millions of tons of plastic waste, spilling oil, and overfishing our waters. Every year on June 8th, we celebrate World Oceans Day to remind ourselves of a very simple truth. We don't just live on the land, we survive because of the sea. If we don't protect our oceans, the blue planet won't stay blue for long. Imagine leaving a heavy iron shovel out in the rain for a few years. What happens to it? It rusts, cracks, and eventually falls apart. Our planet is constantly undergoing the exact same process, but on a massive scale. The Earth's surface is constantly being shaped, scrapped, and broken down by a process called erosion. The main sculptors in this massive project? Running water, groundwater, and giant blocks of moving ice called glaciers. Today we are going to look at the tools nature uses to carve our world. Welcome to our topic, geomorphic agents. Let's start with the most powerful sculptor of them all, running water. In humid regions with heavy rainfall, running water causes the most damage and change to the Earth's surface. Think of a river like a living creature. It actually goes through stages of life: youth, maturity, and old age. In its youth, a river is like a chaotic, energetic teenager. It flows fast down steep slopes, cutting deep into the ground to create sharp, V-shaped valleys. You will see waterfalls and rapids everywhere. As the river reaches maturity, it calms down. The waterfalls disappear. The river stops cutting so deep and instead starts widening out, carving broad valleys and slowly winding its way through the landscape in curves called meanders. Finally, in its old age, the river is completely sluggish. It flows over flat land very close to sea level, lazily meandering across vast plains and dumping all the dirt and rocks it carried from the mountains. During this journey, the river acts as a giant knife, carving out erosional landforms. A small trickle of water turns into a narrow gully, which deepens into a massive V-shaped valley. If it cuts through extremely hard rock, it forms a deep, straight-walled gorge. If it cuts through softer sedimentary rock in a step-like fashion, it creates a massive canyon. Fast-moving water can even drill perfect circular holes into solid rock, called potholes. And if these form at the bottom of a waterfall, they are called massive plunge pools. But what happens to all the rocks and dirt the river carved out? Eventually, the river slows down and dumps it, creating depositional landforms. When a mountain stream suddenly hits a flat plain, it dumps a massive fan-shaped pile of debris called an alluvial fan. When the river finally meets the sea, it dumps its load there, creating a delta. Along its banks, the river builds up natural walls of coarse dirt called natural levees, and as it lazily curves back and forth in its old age, it creates winding loops, meanders, that can eventually get pinched off, leaving behind crescent-shaped oxbow lakes. Now, not all water stays on the surface. What about groundwater? If you pour water on limestone, it doesn't just sit there. Because limestone is rich in calcium carbonate, the water actually acts like acid, dissolving the rock from the inside out. This creates a bizarre, alien landscape called karst topography. Groundwater acts as a silent underground sculptor. It eats away at the surface, creating sinkholes. Over time, these sinkholes collapse, opening up massive, pitch black underground caves. As mineral rich water slowly drips from the ceiling of these caves over thousands of years, it leaves behind rock formations. The ones hanging from the ceiling like stone icicles are stalactites. The ones growing up from the floor are stalagmites. When they finally meet in the middle, they form a massive stone pillar. Finally, let's talk about the heavy hitters, glaciers. Imagine a river made entirely of solid ice, weighing millions of tons, moving a few centimeters a day. Glaciers don't just carve the rock, they completely bulldoze it. The sheer weight and friction of the ice rips massive boulders out of the ground, dragging them along and scraping the earth like giant sandpaper. Glaciers carve out deep, bowl-shaped basins high in the mountains called cirques. If multiple cirques eat into the same mountain peak from different sides, they leave behind a sharp, jagged spike of rock called a horn. Did you know Mount Everest is actually a horn carved by glaciers? As the glacier bulldozes its way down the mountain, it carves massive, U-shaped glacial valleys. And just like a river, when the ice finally melts, it dumps everything it was carrying. It leaves behind massive ridges of unsorted dirt and rock called moraines, and sinuous, winding ridges of gravel called eskers. From the fast-cutting rivers of the mountains to the silent, acid-like groundwater dissolving caves to the slow, brutal bulldozing of glaciers, the earth is not a static rock. It is a living, breathing canvas, and water and ice are constantly holding the brush. Let's understand sources of history in this video. Have you ever seen a cave painting and wondered who made it long ago? Or picked up an old coin and wanted to know its story? These are the clues that help us study people before writing began. Prehistoric means the time before people used writing or paper. There were no books or dated records from that age. Scholars had to dig, study tools, and read the signs left on rock walls to learn about those people. Tools, animal bones, shelters, and cave drawings all give us pieces of the past. Paintings on cave walls were the first art people used to share ideas and feelings. To study the prehistoric period, historians use 5 main sources. First, literary sources. Though rare and often religious, give cultural hints. The Puranas, epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and Vedic texts do not give clear dates, but they show beliefs and customs. Upanishads explain early Indian philosophy, and Jaina and Buddhist texts add traditions and stories. Works like Panini's grammar and Patanjali's writings help us understand language and thought of the time. From later times, political treatises like Kautilya's Arthashastra and texts like Manusmriti show ideas of administration. Classical plays and histories by writers such as Kalidasa, Banabhatta, and Kalhana give social details and king lists. Second, archaeological evidence comes from careful digs of monuments and art. Sir William Jones set the stage with the Asiatic Society, and Alexander Cunningham is called the father of Indian archaeology. Lord Curzon expanded the Archaeological Survey, and John Marshall led major digs. Dayaram Sahni discovered Harappa and Mohenjo-daro in 1921, and R.D. Banerjee continued work in 1922. Systematic excavations from 1924 to 1931 revealed the Indus Valley civilization. Third, inscriptions are written records carved on stone or metal and studied by epigraphy, which means the study of inscriptions. They include royal praises, official orders, and private records. Inscriptions appear in many languages and scripts, with Brahmi and Kharosti most common. James Prinsep deciphered the Brahmi script, opening many doors to the past. Ashoka's inscriptions and the Allahabad Prashasti are key examples of reliable historical evidence. Fourth, Coins give us economic facts and dates, and the study of coins is called numismatics. Thousands of coins help us understand rulers, events, and art, like Samudragupta's coins showing his love of music and royal deeds. Fifth, accounts by foreign travelers and scholars add outside views and details missing in local records. Now, about prehistoric art and periods, there are three main phases: Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Chalcolithic. Paleolithic is the Old Stone Age and has lower, middle, and upper phases, with the upper phase showing more art. Archibald Campbell first found rock paintings in India in 1867 to 68 before Altamira was found in Spain. Rock art appears in many states, with Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh as a major site. Bhimbetka has nearly 400 painted shelters and shows continuous human presence from very early times up to later eras. Upper Paleolithic art shows big animal figures, stick humans, and many geometric patterns. Mesolithic paintings are the most numerous, often small, showing hunts, traps, group life, and dances. Chalcolithic art belongs to the Copper Age and it links to settled farming, pottery, and metal tools. Some general features of prehistoric paintings include many colors like red, white, yellow, green, and black. Paints came from ground-colored rocks. Binders were animal fat or tree resin, and brushes were plant fibers. Colors stayed bright for thousands of years because of reactions with the rock surface. Paintings are found in lived-in and empty caves, so some may have been signals or warnings. New paintings often overlay old ones, showing art developed over time. Symbols often come from nature and religious feeling, and geometric patterns appear alongside daily scenes. So what do we learn from this? We learn that no single source tells the whole story, but together, texts, digs, inscriptions, coins, and foreign accounts let us reconstruct early life. Art shows daily life, beliefs, tools, and social life in simple but powerful ways. Let us quickly remember, prehistoric means before writing. Main sources are literary, archaeological, inscriptions, coins, and foreign accounts, and art moves from Paleolithic to Chalcolithic. So today we learned how scholars read many kinds of evidence to build a picture of ancient life. Keep your curiosity alive and do not rush learning. Imagine looking at a map of the world 5,000 years ago. There are no strict borders, no GPS, and no modern countries. If you pointed to the massive, diverse piece of land we live on today, what would you even call it? India is a very old land, and just like a person growing up, our country has gone through a fascinating journey of changing names and shifting identities. Today, we are going to look through ancient texts, travelers' diaries, and old stone inscriptions to uncover how India actually got its name. Let's start from the very beginning with the people who actually lived here. If you open India's oldest text, the Rig Veda, written several thousand years ago, you won't find the word India. Instead, the northwestern part of the subcontinent is called Sapta Sindhava, which translates beautifully to the land of the seven rivers. The word Sindhava comes from Sindhu, the ancient name for the mighty Indus River. As time passed, literature began to name specific regions. In the epic Mahabharata, you see names that are incredibly familiar to us right now. Kashmir for Kashmir, Kurukshetra for Haryana, Vanga for Bengal, and Kerala for, well, Kerala. But when did the entire subcontinent get one single unifying name? In that same epic, the Mahabharata, two massive names emerge for the whole country. The first is Jambudvipa. This literally translates to the island of the jamun tree fruit. The jamun is native to India, and over time, this beautiful poetic name was used to represent the entire subcontinent. We know this for a fact because around 250 BCE, the legendary emperor Ashoka carved the word Jambudvip into his massive stone inscriptions to describe his sprawling empire. The second name was Bharatavarsh, meaning the country of the Bharatas. The Bharatas were an ancient, powerful Vedic clan. Over the centuries, Bharat became the absolute standard. In ancient texts like the Vishnu Purana, it was used to describe the entire region, and it is the exact same name we use today, whether you pronounce it Bharat in the north or Bharatam in the south. And if you think people back then didn't understand how big this country was, think again. An ancient Tamil poem written over 2000 years ago praises a king whose fame spread from Cape Kumari in the deep south all the way to the great mountains in the north and between the eastern and western oceans. Even thousands of years ago, Indians had a crystal clear vision of the massive land that made up their country. If you're finding this historical breakdown helpful and want to understand every tricky concept in your syllabus with this much ease, hit that subscribe button right now. Thousands of students are learning with us, and we don't want you to miss out. Let's go. Now, that is what we called ourselves. But what did the rest of the world call us? This is where the geography of the Sindhu River changes history forever. In the 6th century BCE, the ancient Persians from modern-day Iran marched in and took control of the region around the Sindhu River. But in the Persian language, they pronounced it slightly differently. They called the region Hind, Hidu, or Hindu. Here is a massive historical misconception. In ancient Persian, the word Hindu had absolutely zero connection to the Hindu religion. It was purely a geographical term to describe the people living around the river. About 1800 years ago, a Persian inscription combined this word with the suffix stan, meaning land, giving birth to the term Hindustan, which later invaders used for centuries. But the name game didn't stop there. The ancient Greeks based their maps on Persian records. However, the Greek language doesn't have the letter H. Since they couldn't pronounce Hindu, they just dropped the first letter. It became Indoi or Indike. Meanwhile, the ancient Chinese were making the treacherous journey across the mountains to trade and learn. They also based their names on the Sindhu River, calling our land Yintu or Yindu. But they had another incredibly respectful name for India, Tianzu, which translates to Heavenly Master. They used this out of deep respect because India was the sacred birthplace of the Buddha. In the 7th century CE, a legendary Chinese scholar named Xuanzang actually traveled for 17 years across India, collecting Sanskrit Buddhist texts and bringing them back to China to translate. So the next time you hear the name of our country, think about the incredible journey that word has taken. From the ancient jamun trees of Jambudweep to the epic Vedic clans of Bharat, to the Persian Hind, the Greek Indike, and finally to the modern map. It's a journey so beautifully complex that when our constitution was written, the creators didn't just pick one name. They opened the very first line of the rule book by bridging our ancient past with our modern future. India, that is Bharat. Imagine walking into a massive, bustling city 4,500 years ago. You look down and notice the streets are built on a perfect grid pattern. Every house is made of uniformly high-quality baked bricks, featuring its own private bathroom connected to a covered underground street drainage system. Now look around for a royal palace or a massive statue of a tyrannical king. You won't find one. Look for an armory full of swords and shields. Nothing. You haven't stepped into a futuristic sci-fi utopia. You have just traveled back in time to India's most ancient urban miracle, the Harappan civilization. Today, we are diving deep into what historians call the first urbanization of India. a society so sophisticated, peaceful, and balanced that it still leaves modern architects completely mind blown. Around 3500 BCE, across the massive fertile fields of Punjab and Sindh, fed by the Indus River, small farming villages began to grow. But it wasn't just the Indus. Thousands of years ago, a legendary mighty river called the Saraswati, today known as the seasonal Ghaggar-Hakra River, flowed proudly from the Himalayas through Haryana and Rajasthan. By 2600 BCE, the towns along these river basins completely transformed into booming advanced metropolises. We call these people the Harappans today simply because the ancient city of Harappa in modern day Pakistan was the very first site dug up by archaeologists back in 1920. When you look at Harappan town planning, it looks less like the ancient world and more like a modern tech park. Their cities were split into two main sections. You had the upper town, built on a raised platform, likely used by the administration and elites, and the sprawling lower town where everyday citizens lived. The wide streets were perfectly oriented to the cardinal directions north, south, east, and west, so the wind could naturally clear the dust out of the city. And their obsession with water management and cleanliness was next level. In the legendary city of Mohenjo-daro, archaeologists uncovered the Great Bath, a massive 12 by 7 meter tank lined with natural bitumen to make it completely waterproof. While some think it was a royal pool, the fact that almost every single common house had its own private bathing area suggests the Great Bath was likely a sacred space for community rituals. Down in Dholavira, located in the scorching run of Kutch, the Harappans became the ultimate masters of water harvesting. They carved massive, jaw-dropping stone reservoirs out of solid rock, one of them measuring an incredible 73 meters long. These reservoirs were seamlessly connected by underground channels to catch and distribute every single drop of rain. Quick break. If you're finding this breakdown helpful and want to understand every tricky concept in your syllabus with this much ease, hit that subscribe button right now. Thousands of students are learning with us every day, and we don't want you to miss out. Let's go. But a great city cannot survive without a massive food supply. The Harappans built highly efficient farming networks, inventing wooden plows that are almost identical to the ones Indian farmers use today. They grew barley, wheat, millets, and they were actually the very first people in all of Eurasia to successfully cultivate cotton to weave comfortable clothes. And their diet was shockingly diverse. By running advanced scientific tests on ancient clay cooking pots, researchers found traces of dairy products, turmeric, ginger, and even bananas. They were eating rich, flavorful meals thousands of years ago. This agricultural surplus fueled a massive global trade network. Harappan craftsmen were world famous for their luxury goods, like beautiful bangles carved from conch shells and highly sought after reddish carnelian beads. To export these goods, they kicked off India's very first era of maritime exploration. At Lothal in Gujarat, they constructed a massive tidal dockyard measuring 217 meters long, the size of two football fields, where cargo ships could sail out into the ocean to trade with far-off civilizations like ancient Mesopotamia. To manage this complex business empire, merchants used small, beautiful seals carved from a soft stone called steatite. These seals featured intricate symbols and animal carvings, which acted like a trademark or barcode so buyers knew exactly who sent the goods. This writing system is so unique that to this day, linguists are still trying to crack the code and decipher it. They were also highly skilled metallurgists. By mixing soft copper with tin, they unlocked the secrets of bronze, using it to craft durable tools, pots, and exquisite artistic figurines. But around 1900 BCE, this golden, peaceful empire began to quietly fade away. For a long time, old history books claimed that violent foreign invaders marched in and destroyed the cities. But modern science has completely debunked that theory. There is zero evidence of warfare. Instead, the Hadappans were defeated by an enemy they couldn't fight: nature. Around 2200 BCE, a catastrophic global climate shift caused severe droughts and a massive drop in rainfall. To make matters worse, the central lifeline of their civilization, the Saraswati River, began to dry up and completely disappear. Without water, the complex agricultural system collapsed. The grand cities could no longer feed themselves. The central government dissolved, and the people slowly abandoned the metropolises, migrating away into small, scattered rural villages. But this wasn't a tragic end, it was a new beginning. The physical cities of the Indus Saraswati civilization faded into the dirt, but their brilliant culture, their advanced farming tools, their pottery styles, and their deep spiritual traditions didn't die. They were passed down generation after generation, weaving themselves directly into the fabric of classical Indian civilization. They showed us that greatness isn't built on the backs of cruel kings or deadly weapons. True civilization is built on peace, balance, and learning how to live in perfect harmony with the world around you. Imagine whispering the secret to a friend and asking them to pass it down a line of 100 people. By the time it reaches the last person, the message is usually completely mangled and hilarious, right? Now, imagine passing down thousands of complex poetic songs across hundreds of generations for over 3,000 years, without writing down a single word, and having the final version be 100% perfectly accurate. It sounds physically impossible, but that is exactly how ancient India preserved the oldest living literature on planet Earth. Welcome to our topic, the Vedas and Vedic culture. What exactly are the Vedas? The word itself comes from the Sanskrit root vid, which literally means knowledge. There are four major collections: the Rig Veda, which is the absolute oldest, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda, composed in an early beautiful form of Sanskrit in the northwestern region of India, traditionally called Sapta Sindhava, or the land of seven rivers. These texts were created by brilliant seers called rishis, male sages, and rishikas, female sages. Instead of printing them on paper, they memorized every single syllable with mathematical precision, chanting them generation after generation. It is such a jaw-dropping feat of human memory that back in 2008, UNESCO officially inscribed Vedic chanting onto the list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. But these texts aren't just spiritual prayers. They are a direct window into ancient daily life. Early Vedic society wasn't run by a massive centralized empire. Instead, people lived in large, tight-knit clans called janas. The Rig Veda mentions over 30 of these clans, like the Bharatas, the Purus, and the Yadus. Each jana had a leader called a Raja, but the Raja wasn't a dictator who could do whatever he wanted. He had to answer to democratic community assemblies called the Sabha and the Samiti. Imagine a giant town hall meeting where everyday builders, weavers, potters, healers, and farmers sat together to debate, pass rules, and make choices for the whole community. The core value of this world was absolute unity. The Rig Veda literally commands the people: come together, speak together, let your minds agree, and let your purpose be united. Originally, the core of Vedic life revolved around yagna, ritual sacrifices. People would gather around a sacred fire, making offerings to please the forces of nature, like Varuna, the god of the oceans, or Indra, the god of rain. But their most important daily guest was Agni, the god of fire. Why fire? Because they believed fire was the ultimate invisible delivery system, the medium through which their earthly offerings actually reached the gods. But as the centuries rolled on, Indian thinkers started asking bigger, deeper questions. They didn't just want to know how to perform a ritual, they wanted to know the meaning of existence. This spark gave birth to a whole new set of profound texts called the Upanishads. The Upanishads completely flipped the script. They shifted the focus from outer rituals to inner philosophy, introducing concepts that define Indian thought to this day: karma, the moral consequences of your actions, and rebirth. The Upanishads unlocked a revolutionary philosophical view known as Vedanta. It taught that underneath all the chaos of the world, everything is connected and powered by one single ultimate reality called Brahman. And here is the best part: the Upanishads teach that this ultimate essence isn't sitting far away in the clouds. It lives inside you. It is called the Atman, your inner self. Because the same ultimate reality lives inside every single person, animal, and plant, the ancient seers realized that harming someone else is literally harming yourself. This deep compassion birthed one of the most beautiful universal prayers ever written: Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. May all creatures be happy, and may everyone be free from disease and sorrow. This era became an absolute explosion of intellectual freedom, and different schools of thought popped up everywhere. You had people practicing yoga to realize this ultimate reality within their own consciousness. But you also had extreme materialist schools like Charvaka, who boldly stood up and said, "There is no afterlife, there is no soul, only the material world is real." Even though traditions like Vedic thought, Buddhism, and Jainism differed on many points, they all locked arms on the most important concepts: using dharma, right conduct, and karma to overcome human suffering and ignorance. And that is the story of Vedic culture. It's not just a collection of dusty hymns. It is the story of how our ancestors sat by the rivers of the Northwest, looked up at the stars, and mapped out an incredible philosophy of unity, truth, and universal love. A philosophy that didn't just survive on paper, but lived and breathed through the human voice for thousands of years, shaping the very soul of India. Imagine boarding a train in the freezing, snow covered mountains of Kashmir and riding it all the way down to the tropical, sun soaked beaches of Kerala. If you stare out the window during that journey, you will feel like you are traveling through 10 different countries. The landscapes will completely transform. The languages spoken at the train stations will change. The clothes people wear and the food they eat will look completely different. How can a place with so many massive differences not completely fall apart? How do 1.4 billion people stay connected? This isn't a glitch in the matrix. It is the ultimate superpower of our country. Welcome to our next chapter: Unity in Diversity, or Many in the One. Let's look at the sheer numbers for a second. The government once ran a massive study called the People of India Project. They found that across our country, there are over 4,635 distinct communities. We speak about 325 different languages and write using 25 different scripts. But beneath all of these colorful differences, there is a powerful, invisible thread holding everything together. Think about your dinner plate. The dishes cooked in a kitchen in Punjab look and taste completely different from the dishes cooked in Tamil Nadu. But if you look closely, the foundation is exactly the same. Across the entire country, we all rely on the same staple grains like rice, wheat, and millets like bajra, jawar, and ragi. And the magic behind the flavor? We are all using the exact same core spices: turmeric, cumin, cardamom, and ginger. The ingredients are universal. It is only our brilliant creativity that makes the dishes diverse. Now look at the clothes we wear. Every single region has its own unique style. But there is one garment that proves this unity in diversity better than anything else: the sari. It is just a single, long, unstitched piece of cloth. Yet it unites the country. Whether it is a rich Banarasi or Kanjivaram silk, a vibrant Patan Patola, or a simple cotton weave, the sari is a universal Indian identity. It has been worn since ancient times, draped in dozens of different regional styles. In fact, India was such a massive global powerhouse in textiles that we completely disrupted the global market. In the 17th century, a beautiful printed Indian cotton cloth called chintz became so incredibly popular in Europe that England and France actually had to ban it just to stop their own local businesses from going bankrupt. This unity extends right into our calendars too. Take the harvest season. Around January 14th every year, almost the entire country bursts into celebration. We are all celebrating the exact same transition of the sun, but we do it with our own local flavor. In one state, it is called Makara Sankranti, while in others, it might be Pongal, Lori, or Bihu. Same joy, different names. But what truly binds a nation together? Its stories. Our ancient literature is the ultimate cultural network. Take the Panchatantra, a brilliant collection of animal fables teaching deep life lessons. Written in Sanskrit over 2,200 years ago, these stories didn't just stay in one place. They were translated into almost every Indian language and eventually traveled across the globe to the Arab world, Europe, and Southeast Asia, inspiring over 200 adaptations. And then you have the absolute giants of Indian storytelling, the epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These aren't just books sitting in the library. They are living, breathing stories that have traveled across the subcontinent for over 2,000 years. But we don't just read one single version. A study in Tamil Nadu alone found nearly 100 local folklore versions of the Mahabharata. Tribal communities like the Bhils, Gonds, and Mundas have their own unique adaptations. Some local legends even claim that the heroes of these epics, like the Pandavas, visited their specific towns. These epics weave an invisible cultural web across the country, teaching universal values of dharma or righteous conduct while allowing every single community to make the story their own. And that is the true beauty of India. We don't demand that everyone looks the same, eats the same, or speaks the same. Indian culture is a massive, beautiful mosaic. It is the shared values, the ancient stories, and the deep underlying traditions that hold us together. We are proud of our differences because it is exactly those differences that make us one. Imagine a world where you are the only person on earth. There is no one to eat with, no one to celebrate your birthdays, and absolutely no one to call when your car breaks down. It sounds like a terrifying survival movie. To stop us from living in lonely, chaotic isolation, humanity built two ultimate invisible safety nets: families and communities. Today, we are going to look at the incredibly powerful network that keeps our society from falling apart. Let's start with the absolute foundation, the family. It is the oldest, most basic unit of human society. In India, you might live in a nuclear family with just your parents, or you might live in a massive joint family, sharing a roof, meals, and responsibilities with grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. But if you look closely at Indian languages, you'll notice something beautiful. English uses blanket words like aunt or uncle, but Indian languages have a precise, loving map for everyone. Bua, Tau, Tai, Chacha, Mosi. And here is the most amazing linguistic secret. In almost all Indian languages, there is no actual word for cousin. Think about it. Your uncle's children aren't cousins. They are simply your brothers and sisters. That completely changes how we view our connections. Your family is literally your first school. It is where you learn dharma, doing your duty and doing what is right. You learn ahimsa, kindness, sharing, seva, helping, and tyag, sacrifice. Let's look at tyag in action. Meet Shalini, a young girl living in Kerala. Her family was getting ready for the grand festival of Onam, and Shalini had her heart set on a beautiful, expensive silk dress. But there was a problem. Her uncle was going through a tough financial crisis and couldn't afford new clothes for his kids. So, Shalini's parents made a choice. Instead of buying the expensive silk dress, they bought simpler, affordable cotton clothes for their own kids. With the money they saved, they bought brand new festival clothes for the uncle, the aunt, and all their children. Shalini didn't get her dream dress, but she learned the ultimate lesson. A family shares what they have so that nobody is left behind. And a family is also about teamwork. Look at Tenzing, living high up in the mountains of Meghalaya. His dad runs a grocery store, and his mom works making traditional handicrafts for tourists. But the work doesn't stop there. Tenzing's father breaks stereotypes by cooking and cleaning the house. His grandfather helps Tenzing with his homework, and his grandmother passes down ancient stories. Every single person is a vital part of the machine. But eventually, you have to step outside your front door. A family cannot survive entirely alone. When you zoom out and connect a bunch of families together, you get a community. In rural India, communities survive on ancient, unwritten rules. Entire villages come together to help each other prepare the land, sow seeds, and harvest crops. They make silent agreements on how to share the limited water and grazing lands so that everyone survives. But communities aren't just for villages, they exist everywhere. It could be your city's resident welfare association deciding the rules for waste management and pet care. It could be a group sharing the same religion, or even your school's sports team. And when things go wrong, the community is what saves us. Take Kamal Parmar from Ahmedabad, Gujarat. He owned a small workshop and noticed dozens of desperately poor kids living on the streets, out of school. He didn't just feel bad for them, he took action. After finishing his exhausting workday, Kamal set up a free street school from 5:30 to 9:30 p.m. and provided a free dinner for every kid. Soon, 150 children were showing up. His dedication was so powerful that real school teachers and older high school students started showing up just to volunteer and help him teach. Or look at how a community can literally save the planet. In Jhabua, Madhya Pradesh, there was a terrifying, massive water crisis. The local Bhil tribe stepped up. They have an ancient tradition called Halma, which means stepping in to help someone in deep trouble without ever asking for money. Thousands of Bhils came together to plant trees and dig massive water harvesting trenches. They didn't do it for a paycheck. They did it as their sacred duty to Mother Earth. We saw this exact same spirit during the devastating 2015 Chennai floods. When the roads vanished underwater and the city went into total lockdown, private citizens and spiritual groups instantly transformed into massive community kitchens, cooking and risking their lives to distribute food to trapped strangers. And that is the incredible reality of our world. We are not meant to live alone. From the aunt who cooks your favorite meal to the stranger who hands you food during a flood. We survive, we grow, and we thrive because we are caught in a massive, beautiful web of interdependence. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, stepping outside, and realizing there are no traffic lights, no roads being fixed, no schools open, no police to call if someone breaks into your house. Total, absolute chaos. To prevent our society from turning into a chaotic mess, we created a massive, invisible machine. Its entire job is to organize public life so that millions of people can live together peacefully and productively. Today, we are going to look under the hood of that machine. Welcome to the topic, governance. Let's start with a simple question. What actually is a government? Think of it as a group of people whose job is to make decisions for a country. The actual work they do is called governance. They make the rules, build the roads, and manage resources. But how does this giant machine work without breaking down? Think of the government like a massive football match. For the game to work, you need three distinct roles, and every player has to stick to their job. First, you need someone to write the rule book. This is the legislature, the rule makers. In India, that's our parliament. Their job is to sit, debate, and pass the laws that guide our country. Second, you need someone to put those rules into action on the field. This is the executive. It includes the Prime Minister, the Chief Ministers, and all the government departments doing the heavy lifting, running hospitals, and enforcing the laws. Finally, you need a referee. That's the judiciary, the Supreme Court and lower courts. If a law is broken, the judiciary steps in to interpret the rules and hand out penalties. Now, why keep them separate? To make sure no single group becomes a dictator. We use a brilliant concept called separation of powers and checks and balances. Every branch keeps a close eye on the other two. But India is huge. One central office in New Delhi cannot possibly know that the street lamp outside your house is broken. So, the government is split into three levels. Think of it like zooming out on a map. The level closest to you is the local government, your municipalities. They handle immediate community needs like street cleaning and garbage. Zoom out a bit and you hit the state government, handling larger things like state highways and the state police. Zoom all the way out and you have the central government. This is the big picture: the army, foreign affairs, and national disaster relief. Quick break. If you're finding this breakdown helpful and want to understand every tricky concept in your syllabus with this much ease, hit that subscribe button right now. Thousands of students are learning with us, and we don't want you to miss out. Let's go. Now, as the government manages all of this, the world is changing fast. Today, you can tap a screen and send money instantly. But this brought a new villain: cybercrime. Criminals can now commit fraud without ever leaving their bedrooms. So, how does the government team respond? The legislature creates strict new laws against online fraud. The executive creates specialized cyber police to hunt down the hackers. And the judiciary punishes them. All three organs working together to solve a modern problem. But who gives all these politicians the power to govern us in the first place? You do. This brings us to a beautiful concept: democracy. The word comes from ancient Greek. Demos means people and kratos means rule. Rule of the people. India is the world's largest democracy with nearly 970 million voters. Because we are too big for every single person to vote on every single rule, we use a representative democracy. Citizens aged 18 and above vote to elect leaders to speak for them, MLAs at the state level and MPs at the national level. To keep this massive system grounded in fairness, Indian institutions use mottos inspired by ancient texts like the Government of India's Satyameva Jayate, truth alone triumphs. And no modern leader embodied these values quite like Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, the missile man of India and our 11th president. Now, the president in India is largely a nominal head, meaning they are the head in name while the elected government holds the real power. But Dr. Kalam used his position powerfully. He inspired millions of young students to dream big, showing us that true leadership isn't just about holding power, it's about lifting people up. And that is the story of government. From the local workers cleaning your street, to the MPs making laws, to the cyber police tracking criminals. It's not just a bunch of boring offices. It is an intricate, balanced, living system, working every single second so that we can live in peace. Imagine trying to manage a family of 4. It can be tough, right? Everyone wants something different for dinner, someone is always fighting over the TV remote, and keeping the house clean is a nightmare. Now imagine trying to manage a family of 1.4 billion people. Impossible. Especially when two-thirds of that family live spread out across more than 6 lakh different villages. If the Prime Minister sitting in an office in New Delhi tried to fix a broken water pipe in Lakshmanpur, a tiny village high up in the Himalayas, nothing would ever get done in time. That is exactly why we can't just rely on the people at the top. We need a system built from the ground up. Welcome to the world of the Panchayati Raj. Think of it as the ultimate grassroots machine. It's a system where ordinary people don't just sit around waiting for the government to fix their problems, they are the government. How does it work? It operates on a three-tier system. Think of it like a ladder. At the very bottom, closest to the ground, you have the Gram Panchayat at the village level. Climb one step up and you have the Panchayat Samiti at the block level, which connects a group of villages together. Climb to the top of the local ladder and you reach the Zilla Parishad, which oversees development for the entire district. But let's focus on the ground floor. Who actually makes the decisions in a village? You might think it's just a few politicians sitting in a closed room. Wrong. It's the Gram Sabha. If you live in the village and you are old enough to vote, you are automatically a member of the Gram Sabha. You get to sit down with your neighbors, debate, and demand solutions for your own roads, your agriculture, your healthcare, and your local schools. From this massive group, the village elects a head leader known as the Sarpanch or Pradhan. To help the Sarpanch out with the actual paperwork, the government steps in and provides a Panchayat secretary for administrative records. And a Patwari, a local officer whose entire job is to keep track of land boundaries and revenue records. Now you might be wondering, does this system actually change lives? Absolutely. It is producing incredible real-world heroes. Take Jnaneshwar Kamble, a transgender individual who ran for Sarpanch in a village in Maharashtra in 2017. She ran against 6 other candidates and won, leading with a simple motto: service to the village is service to the public. Or look at Vandana Bahadur Mehta, who completely transformed local attitudes by becoming the first female Sarpanch from the Bhil community in Madhya Pradesh, pushing hard for better sanitation and education. And then there's the mega success story of Hiware Bazar. This village in Maharashtra was facing extreme drought and their farms were dying. But under the leadership of their Sarpanch, Popatrao Pawar, the village didn't wait for a magical rescue from the central government. They took charge. They built rainwater harvesting systems, planted trees, and turned a dry, dusty village into a green, wealthy community. He even won a Padma Shri for it. But here is the most beautiful part of this whole system. It isn't just for adults. Have you ever heard of a Bal Panchayat? In states like Maharashtra and Rajasthan, children actually form their own parliaments. Kids aged 8 to 14 hold their own elections, form a cabinet, and raise issues directly to the village elders. And they are getting things done. These kids are actively stopping child marriage, fighting child labor, and demanding that their schools get compound walls and hygienic midday meals. They are literally shaping their own future. To make sure this powerful system is never ignored, the government passed the 73rd Amendment in 1992. This rule made regular local elections mandatory and reserved specific seats for women and disadvantaged groups, guaranteeing that everyone gets a voice at the table. But honestly, this idea isn't even new. Over 2,300 years ago, the great scholar Chanakya wrote the Arthashastra, an ancient text on statecraft. Even back then, he described a system of organizing administration by grouping villages together into clusters of tens, hundreds, and thousands. We have been governing like this for millennia, and that is the magic of local governance. It's not about waiting for a powerful leader far away to solve your daily problems. It's about the Gram Sabha coming together, electing a sarpanch, pulling in funds from the block and district levels, and building their own roads, schools, and future. It is democracy in its purest, most powerful form. Imagine you step out of your home to go to school or work, and right in the middle of your street is a giant, smelly mountain of uncollected garbage. And right next to it, a major water pipe has burst, flooding the entire road. Who are you going to call to fix this? The Prime Minister? The Chief Minister of your state? Of course not. They are busy dealing with national defense, foreign policies, and state highways. They don't have the time to track a broken pipe in your neighborhood. For the daily survival of a city, we need a completely different set of heroes on the ground. Welcome to the complex, fast paced world of urban local governance. Running a massive, crowded city is completely different from running a small village. Cities have heavy traffic jams, towering apartment buildings, and massive amounts of waste generated every single day. To handle this absolute chaos, we use a decentralized system called urban local bodies. Think of a massive city like a giant pizza. You can't just pick up the whole thing and eat it in one bite. You have to slice it up into smaller, manageable pieces. That is exactly what the government does. They divide a huge city into smaller sections called wards. Each ward has its own committee and its own elected representatives. Why? Because the people living in that specific ward know their problems best. If there's a nasty pothole in your lane, a blocked drainage pipe, or a need for an anti-plastic campaign or a local health camp, your ward committee is on it. But what is the overall job of these urban local bodies? They are the ones maintaining your local infrastructure. They oversee burial grounds, manage the massive logistical nightmare of collecting and disposing of city waste, make sure government schemes are actually reaching the poor, and yes, they collect local taxes and fines to pay for all of these services. Quick break. If you are loving this breakdown and want to master every single concept in your syllabus just like this, hit that subscribe button right now. Thousands of students are learning with us every day, and we don't want you to fall behind. Let's go. Now, not all urban areas are the same size. Managing a booming tech hub is very different from managing a quiet little town. So, the government divides these local bodies into three distinct tiers based entirely on population. At the very top, for massive cities with a population of over 10 lakhs, that's 1 million people, we have a municipal corporation, also known in Hindi as a Mahanagar Nigam. Think of cities like Indore, Mumbai, or Chennai. If you live in a mid-sized city where the population is between 1 lakh and 10 lakhs, your city is run by a municipal council or Nagar Palika. And for those smaller towns that are just transitioning from a rural area to an urban one, with a population under 1 lakh, they are governed by a Nagar Panchayat. Speaking of massive cities like Chennai, here is an absolutely mind-blowing historical fact. Did you know that India's oldest municipal institution is actually the Madras Corporation? It was established all the way back on September 29, 1688. The British East India Company basically declared that Fort St. George and a 16-kilometer radius around it was now a municipal corporation. A century later, in 1792, they were officially given the power to collect municipal taxes, which practically kicked off proper city administration in India. But here is the biggest secret about city governance today. It is a two-way street. The government cannot keep your city clean if people keep throwing plastic wrappers out of their car windows. The system only survives through something called participatory democracy. That means you have to play your part. If you take a few seconds to segregate your wet waste from your dry recyclables at home, citywide garbage collection becomes incredibly efficient. If you see a leaking public water pipe and report it to your ward committee immediately, instead of just walking past it, you save thousands of liters of water. And that is the true beauty of this decentralized system. Democracy isn't just about pressing a button to vote for a prime minister once every 5 years. True democracy is happening right outside your front door. By understanding how your wards, councils, and corporations work And by actively participating in your community, you don't just live in a city, you help run it. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and deciding you are never going to do a single thing unless someone hands you a 100 rupee note. You wouldn't make your bed, you wouldn't help your mom carry the heavy groceries, and you certainly wouldn't help your best friend fix their bicycle. If everyone thought like this, the world would instantly become a cold, selfish, and miserable place. Thankfully, that is not how human beings operate. Every single day, billions of people wake up and perform work. But not all work is about getting a paycheck. Today, we are going to look at the two very different engines that keep our society running. Welcome to our next chapter, Understanding Work. Let's start with the obvious one, economic work. This is the work people do to earn money or acquire valuable things to survive. It is the engine that keeps the entire economy moving. But it doesn't look the same for everyone. For some people, like an aunt working at the post office or an uncle driving a massive bulldozer to construct a new highway, work comes with a monthly salary. They do their job, and at the end of the month, they receive a fixed, guaranteed payment. But for millions of others, like a farm worker named Sahil, life operates on a daily wage. He gets paid at the end of every single day for his hard manual labor. And here is a fascinating twist. Sometimes, Sahil doesn't even get paid in cash. The farm owner might hand him a massive basket of fresh mangoes instead for his day's work. We call this a payment in kind. Then you have the creators, people like Kavya's father Rajesh, who's a skilled carpenter. Rajesh doesn't get a salary. He buys raw wood, uses his sweat and skill to carve it into a beautiful dining table, and sells it for a higher price than what he spent on the raw materials. That extra money he earns from his effort and talent is called value addition. Now, earning money is essential to survive. But what about the things that make life actually worth living? Enter non-economic work. This is the work done purely out of love, care, and compassion, without ever expecting a single rupee in return. Think about your mother cooking a warm meal for your family after a long day. Does she send you a bill? No. Think about seva or selfless service. If you walk into a gurudwara, a temple, a mosque, or a church, you will see hundreds of people volunteering their time. Look at the langar at a gurudwara, where volunteers cook and serve free, hot meals to thousands of absolute strangers. They aren't getting a salary. Their payment is the deep, pure happiness of giving back. And when a massive group of people decides to do non-economic work together, it can literally change the country. Take the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Millions of citizens took responsibility for their own streets and parks, picking up brooms and cleaning their neighborhoods for free. They weren't hired cleaners. They were citizens taking pride in their home. Or look at Van Mahotsav, the incredible festival of trees. Entire communities come together to plant thousands of saplings, realizing that protecting our forests and our environment is a sacred, unpaid duty to Mother Nature. And that is the true secret to a balanced, happy society. Economic activities help us build highways, feed our families, and keep a roof over our heads. But it is the non-economic activities, the selfless service, the community cleanups, the meals cooked with love, that actually bring us joy and bind us together. Every single kind of work, whether it fills your wallet or fills your heart, is exactly what makes this world a better place. Imagine opening your fridge tomorrow morning and pulling out a simple packet of butter. You probably don't think twice about it, but to get that tiny yellow block into your hands, it required a massive, invisible chain involving cows, farmers, high-tech factories, truck drivers, bank managers, and shopkeepers. Every single day, millions of people wake up and perform work that produces goods or services to generate an income. We call this an economic activity. Hundreds of years ago, almost everyone was just farming or weaving. Today, we are manufacturing smartphones, writing software, and flying airplanes. To make sense of this massive, chaotic web of jobs, economists group all of human work into three giant teams. Think of it like a massive relay race. Welcome to our next chapter, Understanding Economic Activities. The first runner in this relay race is the primary sector. This is the foundation of the entire world. If you work in this sector, you are pulling resources directly from nature. You are a farmer growing wheat, a miner pulling coal out of the dirt, a fisherman casting a net, or a forester cutting timber. You are extracting the raw materials that the rest of the world desperately needs. If the primary sector stops, the entire planet starves. But you can't build a house out of a raw tree, and you can't eat raw wheat right off the stalk. You need the second runner, the secondary sector. This sector takes the raw materials from nature and physically transforms them into something you can actually use or sell. This is the world of manufacturing and construction. They take the timber from the forest and build furniture. They take the raw cotton from the farm, spin it into fabric, and stitch it into your clothes. They take dirty iron ore from the mines and magically shape it into a brand new car. But now you have a factory full of cars and clothes. How do you get them to the people? How do you manage the money? You hand the baton to the final runner, the tertiary sector. This is the sector of services. They don't pull things from the earth and they don't manufacture physical goods. Instead, they provide the invisible glue that holds society together. Truck drivers transporting the goods, shopkeepers selling the products, technicians repairing your broken phone. But it also includes professionals like doctors, teachers, lawyers, and bankers who provide essential services to keep people healthy, educated, and financially secure. Now, these three sectors do not exist in isolation. They are deeply, desperately interconnected. And there is no better story to prove this than the legendary dairy revolution in Anand, Gujarat. Decades ago, dairy farmers in Gujarat, the primary sector, had a massive problem. Milk spoils incredibly fast. Because the farmers couldn't transport it far, greedy middlemen would swoop in, buy the milk for dirt cheap prices, and sell it to the cities for a massive profit. The farmers were working exhaustingly hard, but the middlemen were getting rich. The farmers were furious. So, in 1946, guided by leaders like Tribhuvandas Patel and the brilliant Dr. Varghese Kurian, they decided to completely eliminate the middlemen. They formed a cooperative called Amul. A cooperative is simply a group of individuals who joined forces to achieve a goal they could never reach alone. Instead of fighting each other, the farmers acted like one giant family. They pooled their milk together and built their very own factory, the secondary sector. Inside this factory, they used a brilliant scientific process called pasteurization, rapidly heating and cooling the milk to kill harmful bacteria and extend its shelf life. With their own factory, they started turning raw milk into butter, cheese, and milk powder. Then they hired their own trucks and set up their own distribution networks to sell it directly to shops across the country, the tertiary sector. They took absolute control of the entire relay race. And Amul became such a massive, roaring success that it inspired similar cooperatives all over India, like Nandini in Karnataka, Mother Dairy in Delhi, Avin in Tamil Nadu, and Verka in Punjab. But as we build these massive economic chains, we have to remember one crucial thing. Our raw materials are not infinite. If we constantly extract from the primary sector, we will eventually destroy the planet. That is why modern economic activities are shifting towards sustainability, like recycling. Take paper, for example. Instead of constantly chopping down fresh trees, we collect used paper and run it through a factory to create fresh sheets. Recycling just one single ton of paper saves 17 mature trees. It saves massive amounts of landfill space and it uses 70% less energy and water than making paper from scratch. And that is the true story of our economy. It is not just boring charts and numbers. It is a beautiful, deeply connected human chain. From the farmer milking a cow at dawn, to the factory worker running a pasteurization machine, to the shopkeeper handing you that packet of butter. Every single person in every single sector is working together to keep the world turning.